9:30, then they pushed it up to 9:10, and then they started the clock and paused it, and then they started the clock back up again, and they just paused it, and now they're starting it again. So a lot of back and forth here. So Alan, do you think space flight for the average Americans, and I guess we're talking about people who are not millionaires,
yes,
right? Do you think that it'll be attainable? The question says in the near future. I guess it depends on what near means to you, but let's say attainable in the next decade.
I think certainly. I mean, it started already. The long-held dream to fly in space is occurring. Since the early 2000s, there's been 47 people, if my count is right, that have flown as participants or tourists or whatever you want to call them. And it's going to start growing more and more. And for those that say, well, it's just a rich man's game, of those 47 that have flown, only about 24 of them are of high wealth individuals. 8 were employees, 9 were guests, and the 5 others either were paid by their company paid, or they paid something, but you're not sure what. But I know 2 of the individuals that paid for this flight aren't necessarily high wealth individuals.
So Gary Lai filled the remaining seat that was originally left by Pete Davidson. He talked about it on CBS News Mornings earlier this week. I want to play a little bit of that, and we'll react to it.
Everyone at Blue Origin knew that I wanted to fly, so I was only told about 8 days ago, but I was ready to go. I said, my bag's packed.
So Gary only had a few days to prepare. Bill, is that surprising? I mean, I guess in my imagination, in my mind, I just remember watching The Right Stuff when it first came out, and all those things that those astronauts
jump into pools, being weighted down,
those
or something.
gyroscopes that they were in, and these were highly trained test pilots for the United States military. And now you're telling me it just takes 7 days, and some dude can be in space.
Pack a carry-on.
Is that right? Yeah, exactly. Bill, what's going on?
Well, I think the thing to keep in mind is, the professional astronauts are training for a mission that can involve satellites and payloads, what to do in a variety of emergencies and things like that. And they're going to orbit, which is a completely different experience. Blue Origin is a suborbital flight from liftoff to landing is about 10 minutes. There's no flying it. The computer does all the flying. You're strictly along for the ride. So the training really involves learning how to get into and out of your seats, how to be safe inside the capsule. But it's not nearly as involved as what a professional astronaut has to master before they can go into space for very expensive, very important missions.
One of the things that I find interesting about this current crew is there are several people on here who have really dedicated their entire their lives, or a chunk of their lives, to celebrating space, to inspiring people. We have a woman who launched a nonprofit dedicated to inspiring kids when it comes to STEAM and education and space. And then Alan, your friend George Neild is on board. What have your conversations with him been like? He is a former administrator of the FAA Office of Commercial Space Transportation. I don't know if he ever thought this might be happening for him too. He might be able to go to space. And just point out the launch is almost there, about 10 seconds.
9,
Actually,
8,
hold that
7,
answer, and we'll watch the
5,
launch.
4, command engine start, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff. Shepard smooth tower. DM passing 5,000 feet. 10,000 feet. Max Q.
All right, Alan, I know I asked you about your friend, but before that, I want to ask you about what we're actually seeing right now. It looks like they are in orbit, but I'm not sure. Tell me what we're seeing and what is it that the crew is likely to be experiencing at this moment?
Okay, so you see now the separation of the capsule from the rocket. The rocket will now come back and land under its own power at the pad. The capsule continues to go up to about 62 miles, 100 kilometers, and at that point, the crew members should start feeling weightlessness. And this will go on for about 4 minutes, not a long time, but they'll have a chance to get out of their seats, to look out the windows, to float around and experience the joy of weightlessness. There's something called the human aspect of all this is the overview effect, and that when you look out at the Earth, it's a transformational experience. I had always wondered if that was possible with the suborbital flight. I know it's possible with orbital flight, but the suborbital flight is so quick, you don't really see the entire Earth. But certainly when William Shatner flew, he certainly had a transformational experience. So they should be enjoying weightlessness now. And that, as I said, goes on for about 4 minutes. Then the capsule will return to the launch pad by parachute, and the whole thing is over within not a very long time. And by the way, if you're going to fly in a launch, I'd like to be flying with the chief architect of the rocket.
That's so true. There's your tour guide.
Yeah,
He knows
for sure.
exactly what's happening.
So what about your pal? What kind of conversations did you have with him in anticipation of this trip?
I haven't had a chance to talk with him since he was announced because it all happened so quickly. But I've known George since 2008 when he was at the FAA's Office of Commercial Space Transportation. He's a big advocate for commercial space, for space tourism. He tried to make sure there weren't too many regulations at the beginning to restrain these companies as they got their learning curve going. And it won't be till 2023 when some real more firm regulations take place. He's always wanted to fly in space. In an interview, he said he'd been interested in space since he was a kid. I didn't know this, he had bid on one of those early Blue Origin flights, the one that went for $28 million. I don't know what he offered to pay, but if he's got that kind of money, he's buying lunch the next time we go out.
Yeah, tell me about
Wow.
it. Oh, man. Yeah, what I was saying sort of beforehand was that I really like about this crew is that there are so many people on here who have been champions of space and space exploration, but I don't know if they ever thought they would get the opportunity to be on a flight like that. So I guess I'm kind of sort of wondering, you already know someone on the flight, but I'm wondering, what you guys make of some of the others who have gotten the opportunity to be part of this crew. I guess I'll ask Bill.
Well, they simply have all had the dream, and in the interviews they've done, the Hagels, in fact, Sharon and Mark have said they're not only flying in Blue Origin, they're signed up to fly with Virgin and even with SpaceX on an orbital flight. So you've got to have quite the commitment to want to do that, not to mention probably the right amount of wealth. Gary, I don't know that, I'm sure he wanted to fly, didn't know when it was, so this came about rather suddenly. But they only need about 3 days of training for these flights. And as Bill Harwood so well pointed out, they're just going up and down. They don't need to have a lot of experience. I know at least 4 of them have probably flown on parabolic flights. I know Jim Kitchen even did the centrifuge activity. So it's a great opportunity for all of them. And the other cool thing about people that have flown, like Dylan Taylor, who flew in the last mission, he's to have something called Space Humanity, and he wants to fly 10,000 people, where his group will pick up the cost on that. So more and more people are going to get to fly in the years ahead.
Wow.
So it's very cool. So, Bill, explain to us what reentry is like. That's always been something interesting to me. I imagine, takeoff is fun and exhilarating, and as you're coming back down to Earth, I'm curious about the gravitational pull of the Earth and what people are experiencing as they come back.
The landing looks like it would be rough,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
exactly. Landings are always, for me, the worst part of on a plane. So I'm wondering what it's like here.
Well, it's apparently very gentle indeed. But, you know, as Alan was saying, these guys become weightless pretty much at the moment the capsule separates from the rocket. Then they coast up to apogee, the high point of their trajectory, and then they start back down. And as they're re-entering the atmosphere, tail first, air resistance causes the buildup of gravity again. You know, they start pulling additional G's, they call it. They want to be in their seats by that point because it's going to press them down in those seats. But the actual landing is very gentle indeed. They're under 3 large parachutes, and then right before they touch down, they fire some air jets at the bottom of the thing to slow down even more. So they're actually hitting the ground at about 1 mile per hour around that ballpark. So that's very gentle indeed, and they have cushioned seats on top of that. So, I mean, to me, the launch would be the thing, not the landing. That high-speed jump up to 65 miles or so, and then that slow fall back to Earth. That would be quite an incredible experience.
But Bill, you mentioned pulling some G's, which I like that actually. Doesn't it sound like the name of a band? Pulling some G's. So I'm curious about the suit that they're wearing. Being someone who has experienced some G forces and did not fare very well.
Did you throw up?
I threw up and passed out.
Nice,
yeah, I try to fully experience something when I go for it. I'm wondering if I did not have a G suit. I'm wondering if this suit that they're wearing is like a G suit or something to sort of protect them, or maybe the capsule does.
No, it's pretty much just a jumpsuit. I mean, it's nothing special in that regard at all. They're not experiencing the head motion, you know, the kind of motion that makes people sick when you're pulling G's in high-performance jets. They're not getting anything like that in this capsule. They're coming down kind of in the same orientation all the way down, and they're not pulling that many G's on top of that. So it's a fairly gentle descent. I don't think anybody would get sick on this flight.
For the record,
I might.
You definitely might. I was doing so well pulling G's. It was back of a Blue Angels
yeah, me too.
jet,
Blue Angels.
right? An F-18. And I think the pilot was getting annoyed that he hadn't been able to make me pass out. So right before we were about to land, he says, I got one more thing to do, Vlad.
That's what got me.
Really?
The hook.
Yeah,
the hook at the end.
He said the same thing. He goes, I'm going to do a little like maneuver here and hang on tight. And so as he pulls this really, really tight G, I didn't throw up, but because we had GoPros in there. This is for CBS this morning, and there's a moment where I just go, I'm talking, I'm like, it's not too bad. And then your mouth droops to the side, and then I woke up and I'm like, did I pass out? And he goes, yeah, you did, for like a split second. Gotcha.
Can I tell you and we're not talking about ourselves now, but my experience was almost exactly the same.
So
it was
funny.
that one hook, and he said, "Are you ready?" And as soon as I said yes, I got hit, and then I suddenly realized I was floating, and then I thought, no, this isn't a dream.
Yes, you are not a dream.
You actually were unconscious.
You were.
So
here they are. They're on the ground.
But clearly not rough when you take a Blue Origins flight, because they landed
they didn't do what we did,
like a feather, and I'm sure they're going to be bouncing out just like William Shatner did, all excited.
Exactly.
But yeah, it really is remarkable. And I think the other thing that always blows my mind every time I see this is the landing of the rocket.
Yeah.
And that comes down like it's light
Look,
as
you can see
air.
they're waving. They're like literally waving as, you know, it's like, let me out. Either they're waving or they're like, let me out of here.
And it comes down with such precision too. But I know you can't go deep into sort of the science and the challenge of creating a rocket that can be used over and over again, Alan. But I'm curious about the biggest challenge that they had to get over to create this type of rocket that they could use over and over again that would land in the precise spot that they needed it to land.
Well, it's about sustainability, about safety, about understanding the systems. This was the 20th flight for Blue Origin, and other than 4 of those have been with people on board, all the rest were test flights. So they've tested this vehicle, they're confident in its abilities, and safety has to be the #1 priority for these commercial companies, because any kind of an accident, God forbid, is going to be pretty detrimental. Although I'm sure people like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson, they're going to continue to plow ahead even if there is an accident, and there already had been one on Virgin Galactic during a test. So it's people fly at their own risk. They understand what they're signing up for, and we just hope that we keep having safer and safer missions as we go forward.
Yeah. And Bill, so as we look at the capsule there and we wait for are we calling them astronauts, Bill? I mean, are they astronauts?
No,
What
they're
are they
either
called?
crew members or passengers.
Oh.
As per standard, sir.
Oh.
Yes.
Well, I don't know. Like, if I ever get the opportunity to go up, I'd want to consider myself an astronaut. I would say to standards, I am an astronaut.
Well, you better get in that throw-up contraption that they do. Whatever you saw in the movies, you got to go through all that training. The training is what makes you the astronaut, not going up into space.
Oh.
So without the training, you can't call yourself that.
Well, shucks. I don't know if I want to do that now. I mean, I thought the whole point would be I'd be an astronaut, Bill. So as we wait for the passengers to disembark from the capsule, I mean, what are your thoughts on what we just saw?
Another impressive flight by Blue Origin. They clearly have this technology at a mature enough stage to begin launching on a regular cadence commercial customers, paying passengers, and of course that's been the goal all along. They said in their webcast leading up to the takeoff that they've launched 4 flights now. They're going to triple that this year. In 1 year, they hope to launch hundreds of people down the road. I will take exception to, I'm a skeptic on what Alan was talking about on the viability of commercial space flight. I don't see how the cost gets down enough to where the average person can go take a ride into space for decades and decades and decades. I mean, it probably will happen eventually, but it's not going to happen soon. And you're right, and he was right about, of course, some of these people were not paying customers, but that's all part of marketing. In some cases, when you put a Michael Strahan on the flight, Jeff Bezos himself, that's guaranteeing viewership and interest in your product. So at some point, the number of actual paying customers is what's going to determine the viability of this industry, and I think that remains to be seen.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I agree.
Sorry, go ahead, Ellen.
I Bill on that. We're a long way from bringing the cost down. The magic number for years had been $50,000, and in fact, just last year,
Right.
Richard Branson said he looked forward to $40,000 flights, and then 2 weeks later, he raised it to $450,000.
Wow.
So I think we're from that. But there will be other ways people can fly, either through the NASA Flight Opportunities Program for researchers, Space for Humanity, or competitions and promotions that companies will have.
Right. So we're just watching, I guess, some of the vehicles ride on up to the capsule. I don't know who's going to be in there. Maybe Jeff Bezos will be in there. I don't know. I don't know if he attends each and every one of these things now after he did one himself. And so I guess for the passengers, they're just sort of waiting. It was a short time up in orbit. I presume that there isn't sort of any sort of physical repercussions from this journey, because you guys described something that's, not particularly traumatic, considering where they've gone and come back from.
No, yeah, and I'd like to jump in. I mean, I want to make real clear to the viewer that they don't go to orbit on New Shepard.
Yeah.
This is suborbital. They still go straight up and straight down. That's a big distinction, because getting into orbit is a vastly more complicated process, requires a much more powerful rocket, and that's not what they're doing here. But I think, again, physically, I don't view this as extremely strenuous at all. I mean, people who ride big roller coasters are probably, pulling as many G's at the bottom as these guys are on reentry. So, but that's part of the fun of this. I mean, you're getting some weightlessness, and really, and we hadn't talked that much about it, the views from up there, as Alan was talking about, seeing that hemispheric view of the planet below. I mean, I think that's got to be the big drawing card, more than 3 minutes of weightlessness. I mean, those views you can't get those anywhere else.
That's so true.
Isn't that what Bill Shatner talked about?
That's what William Shatner talked about. So I want to thank you for the clarification, because I think I misspoke. So thank you very much. Suborbital, not orbital. But yeah, that was what William Shatner talked about. And what actual astronauts often say is sort of the lasting impression, to stand that distance from the planet and see its vulnerability, see how we're kind of all in this together on our own flight, if you will, on the planet. That seems to have the most profound impact on many of the people who are lucky enough to have an experience like this.
It'll be interesting to
Jim
look
Kitchen,
forward.
Oh, go ahead. No, go
It'll
ahead,
be
Alan.
interesting the film of what they were doing while on orbit. And this was the second mission with 6 people. So I'm anxious to see how crowded it was. Were they able to move around okay? And the other thing that gets me, having flown on parabolic flights myself, is we always had people in their socks. I've seen people going on these flights with their boots on, and that's something I'm not sure is a great idea because it's easy to get kicked in the head.
Yeah, exactly.
Film.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah, that doesn't
I've
seem...
flown on a parabolic flight myself, and you're right, Alan. It's a socks kind of adventure, but I think in this case they have to wear the boots in case there's any reason for an emergency. Get out of the spacecraft either on the pad or an emergency right after landing, where you might have to get out in uncertain conditions, and I think that's why they're wearing the boots.
I want to step on a cactus.
Exactly.
So how many more of these can we, I mean, I think we were talking a little bit earlier about the ultimate goal, which is, the commercial viability of something like this. At this point, I mean, we're showing this flight, this 4th human flight. How many more can we expect before they make a decision as to go or not go?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So I'm just trying to understand, we keep seeing these launches and everybody gets excited and it's fun and yada, yada. But ultimately, what is the goal if it's just what?
This is the goal. Well, I guess there's a goal beyond this. And we've talked before about, all 3 of these billionaires and their quest for space travel. And they all have sort of higher aspirations for the human race almost.
Sure.
And Bill can actually talk more about this. But this is the goal, space tourism.
Right, I get that, but how many of these do you need to do before you realize that this is something that you can do in the future or not do?
This is the product.
You mean as a business? You mean as a business to survive?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know, and part of the reason is, and Alan may correct me on this, but we really don't know what it actually cost to develop and launch these missions, and how the price per seat is going to balance all of that out. Clearly, economies of scale will bring the cost down. There's no doubt about that. What the number is, what's the break-even point for a rocket company, I have no idea. These companies do not share any financial data, and so it's pure guesswork. I mean, Blue Origin has never even talked about what they charge for a seat. Virgin Galactic has, as Alan pointed out, up about in the $500,000 range, but we don't know what you have to pay to ride a new Shepard because they simply don't talk about it.
But isn't also, at least, I don't know, if you believe what, the Bezoses and the Elon Musks say about what drives them, part of it has to do with kind of the expansion of humanity and preserving this planet. Like I said, if you believe what they say, but that's the way they talk, right, Bill?
So let's see if we can hear what they're saying as they get ready to open up the capsule doors.
Thank you. Thank all of you. Wow.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And the delay was wonderful. They were just full of delay. Wow, Sharon. Wow. Here, honey bunny. Camera's over here.
Whoa.
Hey, we didn't mention that there's a husband and wife team on there as well.
Oh.
I mentioned earlier that there was a woman, Sharon Hagel, who's founder of Space Kids Global. It's a nonprofit to encourage kids to pursue STEAM in education, science, technology, engineering, art, mathematics, environment. And so she was there with her husband as well. And hopefully we'll get some sound from them. I sort of don't want to No, Sam, I don't want to talk over any of their reactions because it's so pure and good.
How is it going up for you?
Let's listen a little.
Was it everything you'd expected it to be?
It was different. I mean, I don't know because I've never been in the centrifuge, so I didn't, I felt my skin pulling taut, and I think more dramatic than even the 0G was the throttle back from 3G. When we throttled down, I felt like I was rising there, and even the entire time I felt I was in 0G, I felt like I felt like I was falling towards the ceiling. So it was intense, and I did get a little bit of a feeling of vertigo.
Really?
So,
Okay.
yeah. And I know most of the astronauts have said in the past that they haven't felt nauseous. I did feel a little bit of nausea for sure. Yeah.
What about the windows?
Oh, yeah, it was like being outside. It was like being.
Wow, that's so good.
Absolutely. It was a beautiful, clear day. I don't know exactly what we were seeing, but we were seeing.
So I thought it was so interesting listening to Gary live because it sounds like someone who is an architect,
Right.
Like
Right.
the whole time he's like, so this is what I experienced.
Yeah.
And it almost feels like he's thinking to himself, this is how I'm going to tweak it
Right.
for a
Right.
better experience. So he was the right guy for the ride.
Exactly. What are your thoughts, guys, when you listen to the first words out of people who just experienced this?
They won't be using Gary's comment in their marketing.
That's great.
So true.
But he gave a real honest experience. And that's the thing about spaceflight. Everybody experiences a little different. As an architect, as an engineer, he went into it with a different mindset. Mm-hmm. I'm willing to bet George and Jim and Sharon and Mark had a totally different experience because they were so looking forward to it. They had this as their dream. So their experience is going to be different. And I'm anxious to hear what they have to say about it.
Yeah, me too. Do we know what this 194 flag is all about at all?
Yes.
we
Jim Kitchen.
do. That was Jim. Yeah.
193 countries recognized by the United
Right.
Nations, and this is his next milestone.
It's 194. That's pretty impressive.
Very cool.
Do we have any sound, or are we? No sound. All right, we'll have to listen to that maybe sort of another day, another time. Alan and Bill, thank you for shepherding us through this process. I know you'll be available for the next launch. Thank you very much.
All right, CBS News has a whole lot more to offer. We're looking back at 50 years of Title IX. The legislation was first passed in 1972 in an effort to stop sex-based discrimination in schools. Ahead, you'll hear from a USA Today sports columnist about why she argues colleges and universities are not living up to the promise of the law 5 decades later.
And this afternoon, President Biden is set to announce a plan to combat climbing gas prices. He could release it up to